We're going to be reacting to just my crazy algorithm. We've got John here, godless engineer. How's it going, man?
Hey, doing pretty good.
And this is the Punk Apostate. Let's go. Have you seen a whole lot of Wes Huff? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of Wes Huff. I know that he was going around a good bit there for a bit. But I don't know much of his theology or what he argues. I just know that he pissed off both atheists and religious people at the same time. So
nice. That's tough. That's tough to do. Usually it's one or the other.
How many people saw his body, right?
400 people saw him all at once. 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says that Jesus appeared to the disciples, and then he appeared to 400 people all at once.
Well, no. That's 1 Corinthians 15 is what he's talking about there. And it's not 400, it's 500. It's kind of weird that he gets some basic shit wrong. Like that's a really basic sort of passage to know.
Yeah, and I've always heard it as the 500. I didn't. That's why I was like, where is? I thought maybe he was getting the 400 from some other, I don't know, some interpretation of some old manuscript or something, and it was like 400 something, and so he's like rounding it down versus rounding it up or something, but. No, he's just wrong. He's just like,
yeah. Well, I mean, he's wrong there, but he's also taking this section to be like, oh, they literally saw like Jesus on earth. And that's not exactly what Paul is meaning in that section. What Paul means in that section is that they had a vision of the supposed resurrected Jesus. And the only time that Jesus walked around with them afterwards and like taught them things, I think is either in Luke and John, or maybe just in John. One of those narratives has Jesus staying for an extended period of time and teaching the disciples in the story, those kinds of things. So, I mean, he's taking the Gospels at their word, which is not, a smart thing to do in the first place. So I mean, he's wrong all around. Like this is bad, and I'm not sure how Joe Rogan reacted, but if I was Joe Rogan, I would have been like, "Yo, maybe we shouldn't take the Gospels at their word that they're like historical facts and shit." Like that would be my response.
I mean, as far as I understand, like most scholars understand that the Gospels, they're first of all they're anonymous, right? And there's not a whole lot of extra biblical evidence of them even happening at the time. And you would think like a New Testament scholar should know stuff like that. But I guess that's where the faith comes in. You're like, well, I just decide that all that stuff is true. I know Wes Huff I know he was the one that also said that like every single word of Isaiah was like word for word, like 1,000 years prior or something. Like it didn't change at all for 1,000 years.
Yeah, I'm not sure how true that would be. The Old Testament stuff, like it doesn't change too much. Like we found like older things, and we can older manuscripts and been able to compare it to some of the newer manuscripts, and they are pretty much the exact same. But like to say that they're not changed in some kind of way, like you can't say that because we don't know how the manuscripts originally existed. The original manuscripts could have existed in a totally different state than what they ended up being in.
And to me though, then he says that like it's some kind of like bombshell evidence that it's true, right? But even if that were true, who cares? Like what is that? Okay, so if they considered it a holy text back then, I would expect it to not change too much. They thought it was holy. So what? But that doesn't mean
right.
It, right? Like
yeah, and I mean, I don't see how that I don't see like the faithful transmission of the Isaiah text. I don't see how that lends any kind of credence to what the text actually says. Like just because you can copy down the same words over long periods of time, that doesn't mean that the words are true or representative of reality. I mean, especially now, like you're not going to have much variation in like the Harry Potter book series. I mean, there's not going to be any variation. And so like you take Harry Potter now and compare it to Harry Potter, in 50 to 100 years or however long you want, it's going to stay the same because, it's easy to make those kind of copies, but, just because we're able to transmit them unchanged doesn't mean that Harry Potter is actually real, so.
right. Nothing to do. It's completely independent with the truthfulness of the claims with their, held therein. Here we go.
I was baptized Catholic. I opened my mind and I looked at all the evidence. I was open-minded. I went to 12 years of Catholic school. Prove to me that God's operating right here, right now between you and me. Prove it. Show me evidence.
The evidence that God exists is, first of all, the order and design of the cosmos points to some type of intelligent mind. Secondly,
You're just gonna say that straight out.
Well, yeah. So the order of the cosmos. I mean, there are underlying reasons for why the cosmos is ordered the way it is, and it really ultimately has to come down to like the transformation of energy and how that works. Because like, and typically, I usually like to go to the water cycle in order to explain the concept that I'm talking about. Because like with the water cycle, the thing that drives it is a transfer of energy, like energy being changed and transferred throughout the system. And so like, you have a puddle of water that gets heated up. And when water gets enough energy, gets excited enough, it changes states into a vapor, into a gas, and it rises up. And then once it rises up and it sits there and then it cools down, it will then it then changes state again into a liquid or any kind of other form of precipitation that you want to specify here for how much energy the vapor loses. And then it falls to the earth and it eventually turns back into water through again gaining energy. And then it turns into vapor again. So it's all about the transfer of energy and the changing of energy in the system. And I think that is the basic premise that works for the entire universe. Like why is everything, why is everything in the universe ordered the way that it is? Well, it's because there are underlying causes that all trace back to the transfer and transforming of energy, and the basic laws of physics that govern reality. Those are the reasons why it's ordered that way. I have yet to find a religious person or apologist that has been able to actually specify where exactly in that process of the transfer and transformation of energy is a magical wizard needed. And they have not been able to point it out. They just ad hoc state, oh, well, God is required for this. And it does not make any kind of sense to me whatsoever. Like they just state it and you're just supposed to accept it because you don't understand how energy factors into the transformation or the transformation of the cosmos and how things are ordered. Like you don't, like that's something beyond your comprehension. So it just turns into this argument from ignorance.
Right. Yeah, I can't figure out how this could happen without magic. Therefore, magic. Right. Yeah. It's funny too, like, because this is one of the ones that I think, and I think it's also like one of those things where like humans are terrible at calculating odds. We just are not. Our brains just don't work well in that regard, right? And so when you have a system that's so open, like our universe, right, and so massive too, I feel like they always forget how big the universe is. It's possibly infinite, right? So as far as I can tell, and I've said this a few times, I don't know. I feel like I haven't had any real pushback on it, but my point is, we don't know if the universe is infinite or not, and it just based on calculating out of infinity, if the universe is infinitely large and life is something that is possible, it's no longer probable, it's inevitable.
Oh yeah. No, I think that life is inevitable. I totally agree with you on that. Yeah.
Right, because just, I mean, even if we have like an infinite, if we're trying to get to 1,000,000, like, so if you're trying to flip a coin and you say like, if we do 10 coin flips to heads in a row, that's very unlikely, right? But if you say, okay, but we have an infinite number of flips that you can, infinite number of attempts that you can try to do it, well, you could get up to the millions in heads in a row. Like you could be almost anything because you have an infinite number of attempts. So, and I feel like our universe kind of is like that. And then it's just a post hoc rationalization after the fact going, man, that's so unlikely. It couldn't happen without God. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes, or it makes me think of the Douglas Adams puddle analogy, because the humans now are like, oh, this has to be designed because it worked out this particular way. But it's like the puddle saying, oh, this hole is shaped exactly for me. So, obviously it was designed for me. And it's all about, like, from your perspective, you're viewing the world as if it were specifically made for you. But that's not the case. You're seeing the end result. So you can't say that this is incredibly unlikely because you don't know that full set of different possibilities that came that exists or existed before it got to like our present state. So you can't make that kind of judgment and say, oh, it had to be designed. No, it doesn't have to be designed. There just has to be a sufficiently large enough set to where we just so happen to be in the one set where all of this shit happened this way.
Right. Which is exactly what we see. Really, it's just like this
Yeah.
one planet where we're at. For all we know, I always say like for all we know, like all the other planets used to have life on it, but the billionaires on those planets already wrecked everything and everybody's died, and it's been millions of years later. Like, I don't know. That could be right.
That's how it would have happened for sure, as we can tell now.
Exactly. That's what's about to happen here. So, oh god. All right. So what's this next one here?
The evidence is life comes from life. Life does not come from non-life. That is why it is far more plausible for me.
I mean, prove that life doesn't come from non-life. You can't. I mean, a lot of people would probably point to the Louis Pasteur experiment, and they claim that he proved that life doesn't come from non-life. Life only comes from life. And in fact, what Louis Pasteur did, he proved that life does not spontaneously generate, which is actually something that is a religious concept, this spontaneous generation of life. And so even Pasteur, he would have not agreed that he proved that life doesn't come from non-life. He just proved that life does not spontaneously generate from rotting meat, right? That's all that he proved.
Right, because they thought, wasn't that the one where they thought that like flies and stuff would just like pop into existence?
Yeah, pop into existence or were emanated or whatnot from rotting meat. And but Louis Pasteur devised an experiment, and he showed that it was not that. It was existing flies would come in, land on the meat, lay eggs, and then the eggs would hatch later, and that's how flies would generate. So it's quite interesting how they regularly misunderstand the scientific process and what scientific experiments actually show, because there's never been an experiment that shows that life does not come from non-life. That's a speculative and ad hoc statement that people like Cliffe here say in order to boast or to build up their own argument, but they always fail to recognize that they just don't have the evidence to say that. And we do actually have massive amounts of evidence for like life being able to self-organize and come into existence from inorganic chemicals. And that would be a more scientific way of actually talking about how life can come from non-life. It's just very obvious that Cliffe runs a script and he sticks to that script, just like a good presuppositionalist.
Oh yeah, they love that. But as far as I understand too, like I feel like Forrest talk about this. Forrest Valkai said like there are the building blocks of the building blocks of life,
Right.
and we have seen them self-assemble, right? And even in space and whatnot. So if they have the building blocks of the building blocks of life, it doesn't, like, chemical evolution is not that. It's like the very next step. We don't have, I think, the exact. We're like missing like one or two steps in the process, but we're almost there. Figuring this out.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like we can connect the dots and we can see how it can easily go from one step to the next step, but we don't have direct evidence of that missing part. But we don't need direct evidence of it to know that the most likely conclusion is that life came about naturally and without the need of a magical super wizard.
Right. And I feel like that is so much more of an assumption. Like I mean, we're just missing, we're like, well, something, we're missing like one or two steps of the process and we just don't have it yet. Right. And they're just like, okay, but if you would just believe in the undead carpenter ghost that, you know, lives inside my heart that I pretend to cannibalize, that is the obvious logical thing that you're missing here. That's like how life goes, you know, let's go from non-life to life.
What don't you understand? Magical wizard carpenter guy lives inside of me, and I eat his body and drink his flesh every Sunday, and that pleases him.
It's so obvious that's the reason life comes from now. Jeez Louise, man. That's insane.
Me to believe in the beginning God than it is for me to believe in the beginning matter and energy. Third piece of evidence for God's existence is moral absolutes.
Okay, hold on. But he said in the beginning, matter and energy. We have literal evidence for both matter and energy. Like, wasn't it just energy? I thought matter came later, if I'm not mistaken.
Matter does come later. So energy was released, you know, in the inflation period. Energy got released, and it was actually too hot and dense for matter to form, for even atoms to form. And so it was only like 300,000 years later or so that light was able to travel through the universe, and the first atoms were able to start to form. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it literally was like he's adding already something that's unnecessary. Like it's just energy, and we have evidence of energy. So it's weird that he's like, I don't think that works, even though that's the thing that we can actually demonstrate.
Every time you say, I should love, and other people should love, you are appealing to a standard outside of us. Well, the only way that standard can exist is if there is some mind prior to the human mind who defines and creates that standard. Fourth piece of evidence is love.
These are always so funny to me. They always do this thing where it's like there has to be some kind of objective standard, the example that he uses is we're supposed to love, which is kind of weird. Example. Usually we would go in the don't harm people direction, but okay. Yeah. And then he's like, there's got to be some kind of objective standard. Okay, what is that objective standard? Like, well, we don't know. You know, we got to kind of we're trying to figure it out and everything. It's like, well, then how is it an objective standard? And it's like, if nobody can demonstrate like that they know what that standard is, how can you possibly say that there even is one? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately with the whole moral argument and them claiming that God is some kind of absolute and transcendent standard for morality, that doesn't work on a couple of ways. For one thing, they're just subjectively claiming, you know, that God is that standard. And so they're subjectively choosing to adhere to God's standard. So they're just as subjective as anybody else when it comes to morality, because I feel like morality is inherently subjective. We always use, you know, subjective language whenever we talk about morality and come to moral conclusions. So I think that it's just inherently subjective. They're subjectively choosing their particular God's moral standard. But even that has a problem, because God's moral standard, or at least the moral standard as presented by religious people, has changed over time. Like over the, you know, many hundreds of years, the moral foundation of Christianity has changed in various ways. Like, you know, prior to 1865 here in America, slavery was a perfectly normal thing and is a literal reading of the Christian theology. And then, of course, you had progressive Christians that came in and had new interpretations and all this other stuff that ended up basically making the argument that it was not a Christian thing to like enslave your fellow man, which is, you know, it definitely was a twisting of scripture, but I feel like it was a twisting in a good way. And so like you have that change in the moral foundation. And so even Cliffe here doesn't have like some kind of transcendent transcendent moral foundation that just never changes. It's just he has his one particular version of it now, and he thinks that's the transcendent version. And so again, he's subjectively choosing the transcendent moral foundation that he wants to be the transcendent moral foundation, and foregoing all the other versions of his transcendent moral foundation to claim that it's just never changed. And that, you know, he's wrong on so many different levels here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it almost is one of those things where it's really frustrating when Christians who, if you talk to them for any amount of time, they're going to say, "Well, oh well, I believe my belief, my doctrine says that I got that this and that, and it's like, okay, well then it's even more subjective for you than it would be for somebody who's not religious deciding what is right and wrong, because if we got I don't know, like I think Aaron Ra used the example of if we had like a Muslim, a Hindu, an atheist, and a Sikh person all in a boat, the behavior, like if somebody hits somebody else or whatever, we could all agree that that behavior was wrong, irrespective of our each individual religious faith, right? But and so it would actually be more objective from the atheist perspective for behavior like that, because each one of those people has like their own subjective interpretation of what they think their God wants everybody to behave like, and that's you know what I mean? So that makes it even more subjective for them, which is just it's their subjective interpretation of their doctrine, of their denomination, of their religion. And then they're like, but that's objective though. And it's like, holy Lord, it's like, you're like so much further off than just an atheist. We'll keep going.
Love. If there is no God, love is simply a drive to preserve the genetic pool. My experience in life repeatedly shows me that there is more to love than simply a drive to preserve the genetic pool.
I don't see love as being integral to like the drive to prolong the genetic pool or prolong the species. Like love is definitely an emotion that we feel due to an emergent emotion that we feel due to our complex central nervous system. And so like love is just a mixture of chemicals that we experience this feeling of love. And so like that's not like the instinctual drive to like reproduce is has nothing to do with love. Love being a human thing, not just a human thing, but I guess a complex central nervous system thing, which other animals have. That I guess I just don't understand, like him reducing that emotion that is felt by sentient creatures. I don't know why he has to reduce it down to just prolonging, or protecting the genetic pool or some kind of weird shit like that. Like that's like Cliffe is. I feel like Cliffe is that guy in class that's just really annoying because he always just talks about dumb shit all the time, and he makes all these dumb shit statements. And I know, I don't know if you get this being in the South too, but like you just want to be polite and not tell him that he's a fucking dipshit, kind of thing. And you're just like, sure, Cliffe. All right, Cliffe. That's fine, Cliffe. I feel like maybe that's kind of the pushback that he's kind of felt all of his life. But just because, and I know that I probably shouldn't make those kind of statements about people, but at the same time, like him reducing love down to just wanting to prolong the genetic line or the genetic pool or something like that. Like, I'm sorry, but that just sounds like something that an incel would say. It's
Right.
like that's a weird definition there, Cliff. Do we want to maybe walk this whole idea out? Maybe actually use a fucking dictionary or something like that? Maybe we should appeal to like scientists about what this emotion we call love is and how integral it is to, the instinct to reproduce and everything. So, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like a really weird way, to specify it.
Definitely. And like you said, like too, it is like a chemical reaction, and it's so funny as just you can crank it up. You can crank that if you can add some chemicals in the mix there, and you can actually crank up the love with this stuff as MDMA. You can actually you can make it you can fall in love with everybody. I'll just in the room there, just give some massages. You're in love with everybody in that room. So it's definitely
Give some massages.
right? Tingly touch, yeah, in love right then. Definitely chemical. I don't know. All right, y'all. Well, thank y'all so much for hanging out. This was a lot of fun. If you want to support the show, you can support us by supporting our sponsor, adamandeve.com, right? And entering that code word Brently at checkout to get 50% off almost any one item, 6 free movies, 3 free gifts, and free shipping on the whole order. Go to adamandeve.com. Also, if you enjoyed this show here, if you want to, you can give it hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. It does a lot for the algorithm. But if you want to support us, you can support us by supporting our sponsor, adamandeve.com, or you can do a bunch of other stuff, right? You can become a patron and go to patreon.com/punkapostate. You can do just a one-time payment on Cash App if you like. And our cash tag is punkapostate. You can also become a member by hitting that join button. And you can also email me. It's at punkapostate@gmail.com. And if you want to send me any of your deconstruction stories, deconversion stories, or anything like that, or just to say, hey, something you wanted to let me know, I love getting emails from y'all. So, but you can also join our Discord, and the link for that will be below. And also follow me on all the socials. All that stuff will be below as well. But thanks again so much for hanging out. This was a lot of fun. And hey, the main thing is to stay logical, loving, skeptical, and compassionate. And we will see you next time.